Dallas Cowboys fans were left in shock and frustration this past weekend as their team's three-game winning streak, which had reignited hope for a successful postseason run, came to a sudden and jarring halt at the hands of a Detroit Lions squad that executed a near-flawless 44-30 victory, a performance that not only exposed vulnerabilities in Dallas's defensive scheme, but also brought into sharp relief recurring personnel issues, particularly in the linebacker corps, a unit whose inconsistency has been a chronic concern for coaches, analysts, and fans alike, and whose struggles have now become impossible to ignore. As Kenneth Murray Jr., the team's presumed anchor at the position, once again failed to meet the expectations set for his role, repeatedly missing tackles, lagging in coverage assignments, and displaying a level of indecision and slow reaction time that has, over the course of the season, cost the Cowboys critical yardage, momentum, and ultimately the opportunity to close the gap with the league's NFC contenders. While contrasting the performance of Murray with Logan Wilson, who was acquired during the offseason amid expectations that he would inject energy, discipline, and versatility into a linebacker core that has been historically unstable, highlights a puzzling and increasingly scrutinized coaching decision to maintain Murray's heavy snap count despite evident deficiencies, leading fans, commentators, and analysts to question whether this is a matter of trust, scheme incompatibility, or simply a reluctance to make difficult mid-season personnel changes, particularly given that Wilson, in the limited snaps he has been given, has demonstrated flashes of playmaking ability, including tackles for loss, coverage stops, and a level of awareness that the defense desperately needs. And yet, for reasons that remain opaque to the public, he remains underutilized in situations where his skill set could prevent repeated breakdowns that have become emblematic of the Cowboys' defensive struggles. From the first whistle, it was apparent that Detroit had prepared meticulously to exploit Dallas's weaknesses, employing a balanced attack that combined power running with short, precise passing designed to stretch the defense horizontally and force linebackers into uncomfortable coverage responsibilities, and the results were immediate and telling. Jahmyr Gibbs' electrifying ankle-breaking catch and run left Murray flat-footed, highlighting a lack of lateral quickness and anticipation, while David Montgomery's touchdown, a play in which Murray vacated the proper gap, underscored fundamental misreads and the absence of disciplined positioning, errors that were compounded by missed tackles from Darren Bland and sporadic miscommunications among the defensive line and secondary, creating a cascade of opportunities for Detroit to dominate time of possession and sustain scoring drives. And as the game progressed, the deficiencies were no longer isolated incidents, but a pattern that called into question the strategic choices made by head coach Mike McCarthy and defensive coordinator Brian Scott, as well as the broader approach of defensive assistant Matt Eberflus, whose challenge has been to integrate talent effectively while maintaining adaptability and cohesion in high-pressure situations, a task made more difficult when personnel are unable to execute fundamentals consistently. Historically, the Cowboys have struggled to maintain stability at the linebacker position, a narrative stretching back several seasons where injuries, trades, and inconsistent performance have prevented the development of a reliable core. And while Murray was drafted and positioned to address these long-standing issues with physicality and coverage capability, his ongoing struggles, as evidenced by subpar tackling efficiency and recurrent lapses in situational awareness, suggest that the solution may not lie solely in player development, but also in a more aggressive and flexible approach to rotations, particularly as Wilson and other younger players sit on the sidelines instead of actively contributing to fortifying the defense against increasingly dynamic offenses in the NFC, where teams such as the San Francisco 49ers, Philadelphia Eagles, and Minnesota Vikings have leveraged versatile linebacker units capable of coverage, pass rush, and run stopping, thereby underscoring the competitive disadvantage Dallas faces if the current approach persists without adjustment. And the implications for playoff positioning are profound, given the narrow margins that define NFC contention, with each remaining game carrying the weight of potential elimination from postseason consideration or the opportunity to solidify a seeding advantage. And yet, the offensive production led by Dak Prescott, Lamb, and Tony Pollard, while impressive in yardage and scoring, cannot compensate indefinitely for defensive lapses that allow opponents to dictate tempo and field position, a factor that magnifies the importance of corrective measures in the coming weeks, including reassessment of player snap counts, adjustments to defensive schemes to better align with personnel strengths, and potentially the bold but necessary move to bench underperforming starters in favor of higher-performing alternatives who can inject consistency and reliability into a unit that has been plagued by volatility. In analyzing individual performance, Murray's repeated inability to read run schemes and cover receivers effectively has resulted not only in direct scoring opportunities for opponents, but also in psychological and strategic strain on the rest of the defense, forcing secondary players into overcompensatory coverage and linebackers into reactive rather than proactive play. While Wilson, when utilized, demonstrates situational intelligence and rapid decision-making that could mitigate many of these issues, further intensifying scrutiny of coaching decisions. As observers debate whether the reluctance to adjust rotations reflects a long-term developmental strategy, a misjudgment of talent evaluation, or simply an adherence to hierarchy that may now be undermining the team's competitive edge. And as social media, sports talk programs, and fan forums explode with analysis and criticism, the spotlight on the coaching staff has intensified, with many calling for transparency, accountability, and immediate tactical innovation if the Cowboys are to remain viable contenders in the playoff race. The broader context of this loss also underscores the fragility of perceived momentum in professional football, where a three-game winning streak can rapidly evaporate under the pressure of a superior opponent or a poorly executed game plan. And while previous victories against lesser teams had engendered a sense of optimism in AT&T Stadium, the reality of facing a disciplined and ascending Lions team revealed the structural cracks within Dallas's defensive architecture, particularly in linebacker deployment, gap integrity, and reactive coverage. And as the season progresses toward critical matchups against divisional rivals such as the Philadelphia Eagles and conference heavyweights like the Buffalo Bills, the Cowboys' ability to adapt, execute, and make decisive personnel decisions will likely define not only the trajectory of their playoff hopes, but also the long-term perception of the coaching staff's competence and strategic acumen, given that the margin for error in a tightly contested NFC is razor-thin, and the consequences of repeated defensive lapses are amplified by the high stakes of each remaining game, where every point allowed and every missed tackle can translate into playoff elimination or seeding disadvantage. A reality that places immense pressure on both players and coaches to respond intelligently and decisively, balancing the need for immediate results with the imperative to develop a sustainable defensive identity capable of competing at the highest level. Additionally, when evaluating this situation statistically, Murray's tackling percentage has remained below league average for much of the season, with missed tackles frequently occurring in high-leverage situations, while Wilson's limited opportunities have yielded a markedly higher efficiency in stops and tackles for loss, reinforcing the argument that personnel redistribution could enhance defensive reliability and reduce the exposure of systemic vulnerabilities, a factor that becomes particularly salient when considering league-wide comparisons to top-tier defenses, where a balanced and adaptable linebacker core allows teams to neutralize dynamic offenses through versatile coverage, gap discipline, and pressure generation, attributes that the Cowboys currently lack in full measure and which must be addressed with strategic clarity and urgency if postseason ambitions are to be realized. Beyond individual and positional considerations, this loss also raises broader philosophical questions about coaching philosophy and adaptability in the NFL, particularly regarding the willingness to make mid-season adjustments, integrate new acquisitions meaningfully, and prioritize merit-based rotation over entrenched starter status. A set of decisions that not only affects immediate performance but also shapes team culture, player confidence, and fan perception,